Welcome to the Recovering Perfectionist Podcast, where I empower you to develop sustainable habits, challenge society, and take messy action. I'm Christine, life balance coach and world champion ballroom dancer, and I believe that everyone has the power to create their very own life by design. The Recovering Perfectionist Podcast was created with a mission to encourage a life of abundance by finding peace and acceptance in our own imperfections and developing healthy self-love through sustainable habits and manifestation. It's time to align with the universe for the full human experience and redefine what it really means to be successful.
It's too good, the secret is out and wow.
Welcome back to the Recovering Perfectionist Podcast. I'm Christine, and I am here with a very, very good friend of mine. You may know him. He's been on the podcast before in past seasons. His name is Chris, and he, AKA known as the Mad Pastor. He is a pastor at Kindred UMC, and welcome, Chris.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I think it's funny that even though it's audio, we still are doing the visual hand motions.
Totally.
It helps with the audio.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. I think Chris is the kind of person that we have these conversations every time we see each other. These deep, meaningful, thought-provoking conversations. And so when you were on the podcast the first time, we kind of discussed your overall value system of life and why you're a pastor and why you do what you do, and talking about the church and religion and kind of how you're innovating all of these different things and helping people. And
that does sound like me.
I mean, and today, again, there's so many things we can talk about, but today we really want to talk about something that has popped up recently in our lives, is transitioning from one major life chapter to another. And Chris had such an amazing outlook and just perspective on this topic that I was like, we have to talk about this on the podcast. So Chris, take us in.
Yeah. So a lot of it comes from my experience as a chaplain, which was a really foundational piece of training for my whole calling and just me as a person in general. And so I've been working on this kind of idea for a long time, that I really think that the key to life is learning to grieve well. Because so much that is important in life involves grief on some level. And grief.
Can I stop you just real quick?
Yeah.
Because I think the word grief is very triggering for some people.
That's exactly, yeah.
Specifically. I'll be the first to raise my hand, because it is I live my life very positively. So if you're oh, well, you need to learn how to grieve. And I'm like, I don't need to grieve. I'm a happy person. And if something isn't going my way, I will find a way to spin it on its head and turn it in a glass half full. But that's not the grief we're talking about here. You can be grieving something good as well. And that's where I think we're does that make sense?
I was going to say the connotation of the word grief almost always includes loss and,
right.
You think of, a funeral and somebody dying, yes, and you're going to miss them. And that's the classic example of grief. It's kind of like the word stress. So the word stress literally means your body and your mind's response to change. So for example, moving from one house to another house, and usually it's an upgrade. Usually it's a new opportunity. It's but anybody who's been through a move knows it's incredibly stressful. It is just the one of the most stressful experiences people can go through, that everyone kind of has to go through at some point.
Right. And I also think that they talk of that, now that I'm thinking about it and we're talking about it, the word that society uses is it's bittersweet. So to represent this transition we're discussing, because they like you sit in the living room with all the boxes packed up and the trucks just took the last of it. And you're just like, oh, think about all the memories we had here. But obviously you're really excited for all the new memories you're going to make in your new house.
Yeah.
But
Or
it's like,
it can also go the other way too.
sure.
You can be like, oh God, I can't wait to get in that new house. And then you get there and you're like, I really miss our backyard. Like, you can be really excited and then not allow yourself to feel both things. And that's the thing about humans, that we are very complex emotional creatures. We are capable of feeling a myriad emotions at the same exact time about the same thing. And that's why, so stress and grief are kind of, it turns out it's true. That's why one of the things I always talk about is, people who try to shut down the bad feelings and only feel the good feelings, we're not really capable of doing that as people. We can only shut down everything.
Yeah.
And so if we want to experience all the joy and all the gratitude and all the blessings of life, it means that we also need to engage with our hearts and our minds the stuff that we're actually feeling a little bitter about too.
Sure.
And there's this kind of, there's a I think a falsehood out there about everything. Like you have to feel a specific way about specific things. And that's not
society's
true.
Programming.
Yeah, it's not true. Yeah. In fact, it's unhealthy. No, your body is going to tell you how you feel. And if you ignore it, it's going to insist on itself. And that's, people with rage problems, usually it's because they're covering up a deep hurt. And the rage is just the hurt kind of squirting out because they're not engaging and grieving what has traumatized them or hurt them in the past. And so, and that also comes with good things too, because everything good requires a significant change. And
it requires a new version. Loss. Right. And it requires a new version of yourself. And like you said, a big example I think we wanted to discuss is, I have a really close friend of mine is pregnant for the first time. And pregnancy is obviously something that happens all the time, every day, to women all over the world. And every woman reacts differently to pregnancy. Every pregnancy is different. They always say that.
Yeah. Every pregnancy is unique.
But I also think that now there's another element to it which has been going on for years, but the generations react differently based on what's available to them and what they feel is necessary for this time in their life or whatever.
Well, it's very broadly speaking, but I know a lot of millennials and a lot of like Gen Z folks who are coming into adulthood.
Yeah,
they dread it and they avoid it because they don't feel like they don't feel like they have hope for the future economically and socially.
Yep.
And two, they don't feel like they have the resources necessary to actually take care of a family. Like it's scary.
Well, so I agree with both of those things because that has been me in the past for sure. But then I look at it and I'm thinking, as I'm getting older, I'm looking at it and going, the resources and the money it takes to raise a baby and all these different things, where did I get that information? Have I crunched my numbers? No.
Yeah.
These are things I got from my parents, from past generations, from Google, which is a consumerism, like just all this
the
stuff.
General zeitgeist too, like just the kind of the conversations that are in the ether,
Totally. And so then my friend is our age and being that she's doing this now, she's like, oh my gosh, like 70% of this is optional. Nobody told me that.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
She's like, nobody tells you that. And then of course she goes back to like, parents, past generations, and are like, oh, well, we did this because of this. And we did. And it's like, right. But like, that a choice?
They're following like the map that they've been handed. And they're not going like, yeah, but what's over here? Like, what about what's over here? Like, so one of the things so I was very nervous financially moving careers, and I had a bad experience when I was on staff at a church. We changed pastors. He and I did not get along, and he basically devoted himself to like getting me fired and making my work life miserable. And so I set about trying to fix that problem and found a way to do that. And I worked 2 jobs so that I could keep my house, because that was the best option. But that in between time, when I knew the problem, but I didn't have the solution yet, very, very anxious. And the thing that helped me, again, the key to life is grief. So like the thing that helped me the most was, because I was living in a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house that I really loved. And it was my first house that I bought, and I didn't want to let go of it. I wanted to keep living there.
Right.
And then I just kind of sat with myself and been like, and I was like, it's just me and my girlfriend, fiance at the time. And I don't need 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment and was perfectly happy.
Right.
And so like, just by grieving the loss of like, yeah, man, I'm going to miss having this kind of space and living in this kind of nicely appointed house that I really enjoy living in. And I'm going to really miss that.
Right.
But that is not necessary to enjoy life and to thrive and succeed and to survive. Like, there are worst case scenario, I can take a job where I earn $40,000 a year and rent an apartment, and I can make that work for a couple or 3 years quite easily, actually.
Well, right. And so my second point to that is it's also just temporary, because if you really do enjoy having that space,
everything is.
There's right. That's true.
Everything is.
Right. There's nothing saying that later on you can't move back into a 3-bedroom, kind of house.
Yeah. If that's the goal that I set, then okay. Just like identifying the first problem, like, okay, I can't continue to work here and be happy. I need to find a way out.
Right.
Part of that way out may not be having a house. Inverse, let's say I did find a way to, survive with the apartment rather than keeping the house. Same thing. I can identify the problem. The problem is I would really like more space. And I'm a capable person. I can engage opportunities and look for, a way to re-achieve what I've lost. Like that's perfectly within my capacity to do. And so like a lot of the anxiety that I was experiencing, I realized like, this is just me avoiding the grief. This is just me not acknowledging that, everything is temporary. The house we live in right now is wonderful. I love it. But also, same thing, when I wake up in the night and I'm anxious about, will this stay here? Can we keep this up? We have to replace our roof. We're looking into options for that. And it's like, I don't know, is it going to cost too much? What happens if a hurricane comes through? It's like, man, everything's temporary.
Right.
Everything's temporary. We'll be fine.
Yeah.
If we lose our house, I know people who have lost their house in a hurricane, and it was tragic and it was sad, and they reached out for help to their friends and family. They started a GoFundMe. They had insurance and they recovered, and they went through a rough transition, and now they're fine and they're okay and they survived, and they kept what was important, which was their love for each other and their family and connection with their friends and their community, and they're fine. They're happy, like it's possible to go through bad things and be okay and be happy even.
Totally. So let's talk a little bit about what that transition looks like. Cause I think you just discussed a lot of that. It's more so for me, like, I think for me, it's like the not shaming yourself for how you think you're supposed to feel. Because I think this is the societal
there's external pressure on that.
Right.
That's not just internal. That's not just you. That's everyone else too.
That's everyone else. And then you have to decide how you're going to react to that. And me, most of the time, my reaction is, I don't care what anybody thinks. I'm going to do whatever I want. And to some people that can look like really selfish or arrogant or whatever. And I'm like, but that's my defense mechanism and my protective shield against you shaming me for how you think I'm supposed to feel. Yeah,
sometimes we can get a little too far out ahead on it. I think that's just a matter of being honest with ourselves.
Right.
But in my experience, most people go the exact opposite direction. Most people have a hard time standing up against external pressure.
Agree.
Most people
Yeah, no.
along
I'm
with
not
it,
the norm.
you know?
I'm definitely not the norm.
Right.
I'm just saying that's what I tend to gravitate towards because I grew up that way and I was given that confidence, thank goodness. But you're right. Most people are the ones that are, they succumb to that pressure and they're like, yeah, you're right. Maybe I am supposed to feel this way or whatever. So just some examples, we kind of discussed a few of them. Obviously, you know, the pregnancy thing, like you're excited for a new baby, but you're also terrified that this is going to change everything about you and everything about your life.
My life? What's going to happen to my body? What's going to happen to the relationship between me and my partner? What's going to happen to
all of that?
All of it is going to change. It is. And
but what is society
anyone
saying?
who doesn't feel terrified at least a little bit is kidding themselves. Like, well, you're not paying attention then.
And society says, what does society always ask? Are you excited? Oh my gosh, this is so exciting. Like what, you know, it's like you almost have to be excited in order to not feel like you're like dreading this next chapter.
Yeah, you're some kind of pariah who doesn't
right.
Yeah.
I
have a big thing. So one of the things that I try to pay attention to is yes or no questions. So like what you just said, are you excited? So they've already prescribed what they want your answer to be.
Right.
They just communicated to you what the acceptable interaction is for them.
Right.
And so I experienced a little bit of this with, you know, I went through a pretty big transition when I had a lot of insecurity growing up. I was the go along with it, say and do whatever it takes to make people like you or at least ignore you so that they don't hurt you, you know?
Right.
And I went through a huge transition, and you know, I'm a pastor, I'm a Christian, so my understanding of that was like a knockdown, drag out with God that took several months, and it was a lot of grieving and a lot of like, you didn't protect me, you're supposed to be good and all powerful, so where the heck were you, you know?
Right.
When I was being abused, when bad things were happening to me, and so I went through a knockdown drag out over months, but I was still working for the church. And so, you know, every Sunday morning you encounter church people and they're like, hey, good morning. You know, how is it with your soul? You know, like, how's it going? Those types of things. And I just, in the middle of that transition, decided I'm going to be honest and I don't care if it makes people uncomfortable.
Right.
And so, you know, it's like, so how's your relationship with God? Those types of questions. It's like,
oh my God,
shitty, actually. I don't know if I'm allowed to cuss or not, but.
Oh, yeah, go for it.
Okay, yeah.
This is an adult podcast.
Yeah, right. So yeah, pretty bad. Me and God are fighting right now, and I don't like it. And people are like, I don't know what to do with that. And
that's
so
it.
Just walk away.
I was like, what's the follow-up question here?
Yeah, do you want to know or not? And if you don't want to know, fair enough, walk away. But I kind of got through with putting on a mask to make other people more comfortable with, like, if you care about me and you're asking, then I'll tell you. And not everyone responded that way, for sure.
Well, right.
Plenty of people who are my dearest friends who have stayed connected, even despite the fact that I've moved away and, you know, distance is an issue. The people that I'm still deeply connected with are the people who are like, man, that sounds awful. You know, like,
let's talk about it. Well, how can I help?
Yeah. Do you need anything? Like, no, not really. I got to get to work. I'm on Sunday morning. I got to get back to it. But, and they're like, well, let me know if you need anything. Like those people who can hang when you give the bad answer, quote unquote.
Yep.
Which I think is actually a great answer. The honest answer is,
well, it's exactly like it. You know what this reminds me of is what we call it's what I call filler conversations, right? How's the weather? How are you doing? Small
Football
talk.
And the weather. Football and the weather.
And so when people ask you, oh, hey, how's it going? I'm good. How are you? Not everybody's good. How are you? Like that doesn't, but the amount of people that say that is probably north of 80% of that's just the common answer of like, oh, hey, how's it going? Oh, I'm good. How are you? What's going, you know?
Yeah. And context is important because like if the teller at the bank is like, you know, welcome to the bank, how are you? I'll be like, good. I need to deposit a check.
Well,
like,
totally.
You know,
there's
like,
a different
I'm not going to
agenda.
dump my problems on a stranger.
100%.
But when my friends who I'm supposed to have a relationship with ask and they can't hang for the answer, it's like, all right, I think I might probably reevaluate the level of our connection.
Well, that's it. And it's like when people ask that, you can tell it's just like an automated response or an automated question of like, hey, I'm supposed to check in with you, or that's the way to break the ice of this conversation. But then it's like, do you really want to know? Or are you just trying to get to the next part of the conversation?
Yeah. And being honest is a really quick way to answer that question.
100%. Yeah.
You'll know real quick which one they are.
Totally. And I think it's a good way, for those listening to weed out, like Chris said, like we're going to know really quick, especially in the transitions, who can hang with me and how we need to maybe evaluate the depth of this connection and relationship that we have or have not created.
Yeah, I'll give a small example because this is how subtle it can be, because not everything is like direct communication. Right. This was just a very subtle example. My boss at the time when I was going through that, the pastor of the church, he, we would have staff meeting with all the staff and the pastor, and we, just kind of touch base every week. Yeah. And he's a funny guy. He likes to make jokes. And I just kind of stopped laughing at things that I didn't think were funny.
Ooh.
I wasn't like, with my arms folded with a frowny face. I was still engaged and bright-eyed and kind of had I pay attention to, sometimes your body tells you how you feel and sometimes you tell your body how to feel. Yeah. And so one of the things that I've noticed is if I just kind of crack a little bit of a corner of a smile in my face, I start to become more engaged and more optimistic about whatever is happening. Right. And so if I'm just kind of disengaged and feeling bored, then I'll kind of crack that little smile on my face and like just take a look at how I'm engaging in the situation. And so I was doing that. I was still practicing that, and like I wasn't shunning anyone else for laughing. I just stopped laughing at things that I didn't think were funny. Right. And it caused a problem. Oh, and he didn't know how to articulate it, but I remember him being like, "Oh, come on, like." Come on. He was
irritated.
Yeah, he was mad at me for not laughing. And I used to laugh. I used to laugh at things that I didn't think were funny. Because I was just trying to do whatever it took to make people happy and make people like me, or at least not hurt me. That was my modus operandi. And I just stopped doing that. I was like, yeah, if you're going to hurt me, again, grief is a key to loss, or a key to life. You're going to hurt me, then, that sucks, but I think you're going to come out worse. Like, you're going to be embarrassed if you try to hurt me around people who are watching. Like, that's going to be bad for you, and I can take that if it's not ongoing. Yeah. So like I just stopped laughing, and it caused a big problem, and it kind of snowballed into a bigger problem and a bigger problem.
Oh my gosh.
And he kind of kept showing his ass, actually, like making a fool of himself about it, because it was tapping into some insecurity that he had. And I tried to talk to him about it, and he couldn't get into it. It turned into a thing. And eventually, of course, we reconciled, and he was also going through some life stuff himself.
Well, but that's the thing. That was going to be my first question, is like, what was he going through at the time? Because it took him so long to get to a point of like, hey, dude, we need to talk about this. Yeah. Like, this is weird.
Normally, I have a lot of respect for this person too. Yeah. I love them dearly. And it was out of character for him to be that way. But it was just, all it took was not laughing at jokes to spiral out into a thing. And just like you were talking earlier about, it is hard to stay in that pocket and not succumb internally to that external pressure of, to be honest with yourself about who you are, how you feel, and what you want to be about, in the face of a bunch of people, and especially people with kind of power dynamic over you, telling you that they want you to be a different way. Like, it's really hard to say no.
Or they say they're going to support you, right? You're like, this is my inner circle, right? They're going to support me no matter what, right? And then you get to a point where you're like, well, where's the line? Like, is there, where does it get to a point where they're uncomfortable? But I
think to be kind of on the other side, there is a healthy version of having a lot, like, when you say no matter what, Like, well, no, not if you do something horrific.
Well,
not no
right.
matter what. So
Correct.
it is important to know where your own line is. But when
Correct.
the no matter what breaks down at you're not laughing at my jokes, so now we're in a fight.
Right.
Come on. Like that's
Right.
that's a pretty low bar for what you consider to be friendship,
Totally. So we were talking about like giving someone a response, like when you were talking about your relationship with God, right? And you're like, how's everything going today? And they're expecting, we already know the answer they're expecting. And you decide, I'm going to give you the real answer today. And
also without a demand. That's
right.
important. Because some people are offloading their problems onto other people in almost like a blaming, demanding way.
Right. Like you're supposed to fix all my problems.
Yeah. And that's not what I'm talking about.
No.
I'm talking about just
agree.
Like, yeah,
thank you for
it's not going great.
Yeah. Thanks for disclaiming that. Because I agree. How many times can you keep it bottled up inside and then have to put on a face for public? That's why people who are really depressed or they are going through a really hard transition, again, whether it's good or bad, like I think the moving transition is a great one because you're talking about something that is extremely stressful and it tends to always happen at the wrong time, but this is when the house is available and now you have to get the movers and then all this stuff happens and it's so-and-so's birthday and it's just
and it's almost always a geographical thing too. So you're leaving proximity with friends that you love and community that you're a part of.
There's an
You're going to have to reintegrate into a new community, find your new people. Like that's a lot. It's hard.
That's a lot. But the idea, like, why would you be doing this if it was so traumatic? The idea is that you're doing this. Like I have a friend who just moved from Kansas City to Los Angeles. Huge transition. That's all she's ever known is the Midwest. And now she's going to the West Coast, just very different culture. Very different culture, but she wanted to live near the beach.
We live in Florida, and when we go to visit Kansas, that is like a wildly different feel of just walking down the street and like, going to like a bar or a club or a dance hall or whatever and interacting with the people. It's wildly different. It's hard to describe.
Right. It is. But she's been excited, her and her husband, about this transition for over a year. And they just needed to find the right time with their jobs. They're both remote and she's building her own photography business and she's thriving. And she knew that this was the move she needed because she was becoming a big fish in a small pond. So super exciting. She gets to live near the beach, all these new opportunities. But she's leaving everything she's ever known, her family, her brand new niece that her sister just had, and she's going to have to acclimate to a new coffee shop and a new this and a new that and all these things.
I'll go one level deeper because that big fish in a small pond thing, that is a real thing for people who are trying to build a career or a calling or like. That is a hard thing to do and a necessary thing to do if you want to really continue to grow and succeed.
Right.
And it kind of comes for all of us. If you're an entrepreneur, it's coming for you.
It's right.
You are going to have to leave the market that you dominate in order to go to a market where you are competing against people who are better established and better than you at it.
Mm-hmm. That's terrifying.
And
that is absolutely terrifying.
And it's a huge investment in yourself. It's a huge investment in like, I trust that I have the capacity to figure that out and succeed in that environment, and I'll find a way. It is risky, but that's why you make that investment. It's almost certainly going to be difficult at first.
Well, and the grief of, like you said, I love how you said dominating. Because you're at the top of the food chain in this particular market. And in order for you to grow, to continue being at the top, you're going to have to start again at the bottom somewhere. And that emotional transition is, wow, how exciting. Look at all these brand new opportunities. But then when someone asks you for real, you're like, yeah, I'm also like terrified. And this is like, I have to start from not starting from scratch because you're still building blocks.
You're bringing what you had with you.
Correct.
So it's the 6th grade girl or a 5th grade girl
Yeah.
Depending on where your middle school, elementary school divided, depending on what county you're in or whatever.
Yeah.
But so I was a youth director, and for us, it was 5th grade was elementary, 6th grade was middle school.
Right.
And 5th grade girls, broadly speaking, are like more intelligent and more mature than any of the boys in their school. So they're at the absolute top of the food chain. They're better than just about every other population in the elementary school.
Right.
Then the very next year, they go to 6th grade, and that most 6th grade girls are just beginning to develop and just beginning to change all of their hormones and their brain structure and their body, and they're with 8th grade girls who have already been through that.
That's right.
And if you've ever met an 8th grade girl, they're mean.
And overly confident.
Yeah. And so the 5th grade girl goes from the top of the food chain. And this, again, very broadly speaking, this is not, there are certainly exceptions and outliers and all that, but 5th grade girls from the top of the food chain immediately to the just bottom of the food chain.
That's such a great example, because
that's what it's like to go from
necessary.
big fish to small fish.
It is. And it's not like you're not, I mean, you're learning more things in school, you're going through your education. This is a natural progressive step that everyone needs to go through. But yes, it kind of like puts you in your place and helps you reevaluate, who am I? How am I going to be in this?
You got to let go of what you were.
That's right.
And you got to figure out what you're supposed to be now. And that's hard because before you can do that, you have to figure out what is most what your values are, what's most important, what's worth working for. I
want to pause on that for a second. Okay. Yeah, go ahead. Is it financial?
Well, is it financial? Is it social? Is it some combination? Because you have to prioritize. Sometimes it's like, you know what? So in my transition, I was working 2 jobs. I was working like 60 plus hours a week, mandatory.
Yeah.
Like easily 60, and I was driving a lot, and it was a rough year, but it's like, I'm willing to sacrifice that social part for a year in order to be financially stable. That a year from now, I'll be able to have more freedom to actually pursue the social parts of my life.
Yeah.
And so that was a value choice, and that was really difficult to make. And that was a rough year. Like it was hard. Right. So
let me ask you this. I want to pause on this moment, because this whole value of like letting go of who you were to be able to, step into the power that you're going to become. Because again, all these transitions, it doesn't matter if you're an entrepreneur or not. That is, yes, we go through a lot of transitions, but also again, normal things like changing jobs, school, babies, all that stuff. So, but the value system, I think, is it easier to grieve and go through this transition if you are solid in who you are and what you value?
Of course. Yes, of course. And I think that's the place to start. Yeah. Because it's so to go back to
most people are not that way. I would say you're going to catch most people that don't know who they are, and they are influenced a lot by society. And so these transitions, that's why it comes back to these conversations of like, are you excited? And you're like, like, I don't want to make you uncomfortable by telling you the real reason. Right. But I also I need to just tell you what makes me feel comfortable, because I think it's like, we don't want to make you uncomfortable, but I'm also uncomfortable telling you the truth too. Yeah. So it's like,
yes.
Right.
What will happen to our relationship if I tell you the truth?
Right.
And most people are asking it that way. I would say, well, what's the point of your relationship if you can't tell the truth?
Ooh, amen.
It's the inverse to me.
Right. I agree.
Because one of my really high values is sincerity. Mm-hmm. If I really can't be sincere with someone, if I can't be vulnerable and have permission to kind of like try something and maybe fail with them, even if it's just something simple like a joke,
Yeah.
If I tell a joke and they don't laugh, and then they don't like me because I don't laugh, or because if that happens, it's like, all right, well, the joke wasn't good. It's little things like that really, those stack up and kind of comprise the relationship.
Right.
And so the ability to be honest and sincere is one of my really high values. And so I've for the past, I don't know, 4 years now, I've been paying attention to who I can be sincere with and who I can't.
Right.
And if I can't be sincere with them, then I kind of just stopped reaching out to them. I'm not gonna. And then when they reach out to me, I'll consider it. You know, maybe, oh, you want to go grab coffee? Oh, I'll think about it and then decide whether or not it's worth it. You know, but that comes from, I know my value is sincerity. I know my value is the ability to be vulnerable with people.
Right. So I completely agree with everything that you're saying, because I feel the same way. I'm like, I have no problem if someone it just doesn't feel aligned. You know, there's so many ways to say that it's just not, it doesn't feel right. But I think let's speak to those people as well, who I think are the majority of the people who are not confident in who they are. They don't actually know. They're going through all these life transitions. Their value system is like part parents, part school, part environment, a little bit of some like spirituality or religion they've tapped into.
They're kind of lost in the midst of all these other larger influences.
And they're like, who am I? And what do I value? And if I show that to people, because I think there's two parts to it. It's figuring out who you are and what you value so that you can actually, what do you say? Like, translate that to people.
Yeah. Like,
you know
come
what I mean?
into your own and be able to communicate that.
Communicate that to people. Thank you. But then it's also understanding, I completely lost my train of thought.
Okay, so I grew up around 12 steps and recovery stuff.
Okay.
And one of the things they talk about when people are first getting into 12 steps, one of the things they say is, don't expect the world to stand up and applaud when you get sober from whatever it is, you know? And you know, you're like, the idea of being a perfectionist in recovery is like, don't expect the world to stand up and applaud when you're addressing the things that make you anxious and make you perfection-y to a fault.
Right.
They're actually going to hate you for it, probably.
Yeah.
Because you're no longer filling the kind of social role that you used to fill. And so
they're not benefiting from you anymore.
Yeah, not, at least not in the way that they were expecting, you know?
Right.
So the world will not stand when you start to get healthy and start to get into yourself and really start to like try to identify and prioritize who you really truly are. The people who have surrounded you are people who like the old you. And so like it, again, grief. You know, you're going to lose relationships, and that is sad, and it's going to hurt, it's going to be grieving. And also it's work, like you have to love yourself enough to be willing to do that. And most people are taught not to love themselves.
Right.
And so when I was going through, I had the help of a counselor when I was going through this big knockdown drag out thing. And one of the simple ways in, and I'm not like woo-woo spiritual, despite the fact that I'm a pastor and I talk about an invisible God and all, like, I'm really not into, like, it makes me uncomfortable a little bit. But the counselor that I went to, who had a track record of success as long as my arm, so I trusted her. She specialized in like inner child work. And so we would do things where she would ask me to close my, like, when's the first time you could remember feeling that way?
Oh, wow.
Go back to that little boy, close your eyes. Can you see him? And like these types of exercises. And they made me very uncomfortable. And they made me want to roll my eyes, but I'll be damned if they didn't absolutely work, you know?
Oh, wow.
And so one of the little techniques was, that question, when's the first time you can remember feeling that way, and go back. And really try and see the little kid that felt that way the first time that you can remember. How do you feel about that kid? Can you love that kid? Can you give that kid what they need in the moment? And then the second exercise that was really, really helpful for me was simply, rather than asking, what do you want? Ask yourself, what does that kid want? And sometimes it results in like, you know, a 27-year-old playing with Legos.
Right. Feeding the,
You
I
know?
mean, we talk about that a lot in the coaching and wellness space, feeding your inner child. Sometimes you just need to
Yes.
go run and dance. Sometimes you just need
Yes.
to go run and play and color and
Yeah, I've been a guitar player for a long time, and I came up in the St. Petersburg and Tampa scene playing like
yeah,
kind of, it was like emo was really popular at the time. It was like kind of hard rock and roll guitar stuff.
right.
And I had to, as an adult, come to the realization that I really love like Ariana Grande and Taylor Swift and Spice Girls. Like it's fun. I like to dance to it. I like to sing to it. My karaoke go-to is Wannabe by the Spice Girls. It's fun. I like that. And I really wasn't allowed to like that.
Right.
And so things like that, like what does that kid actually want? And discovering that, oh, those are the things I enjoy.
Yeah.
And then that leads step by step into a deeper understanding of what are the things that are most important to me. And it turns out to me the things that I love are sincerity, faithfulness, and empathy. Like those are my big three things.
Yeah.
People, and also I will say like some kind of internal consistency. People who can learn something new and change their minds, but there's not like a single word for that, but like that's the other big thing that's important to me. Right. The ability to learn something new and be malleable and not be like hardcore fundamentals stuck in your ways.
I have new information now. That's the way of the world. We're always evolving and new information is coming out and new laws are being passed. And you do have people from older generations that feel so comfortable where they are. And they're like, I can't accept this.
It's very scary.
It's very scary because it's almost like, well, and it's not even that. It's not even being left behind because as we see it, especially in the United States where everyone has a voice, is they are holding back society and they are almost resisting the transition, right? Because we're talking about transitions here. So they're almost resisting this new, like, I don't think LGBTQ should get married. And you're like, why would you say that?
Like, and also, what do you care?
And how does it affect you?
You're playing old tapes. You're playing old tapes, you know, like.
How does that affect you? And why do you feel like that is so important for you to speak up on when this is where the world is moving towards?
Yeah. So on my Mad Pastor YouTube channel, almost every like argument, quote unquote, I get into with somebody who leaves comments. Yeah, because they're almost always, because one of the things I really try to talk about is not taking the Bible literally all the time.
Right.
You can't, it contradicts itself. Anybody who's actually studied the document understands that it constantly contradicts. And so like taking it literal is like the worst way to read it, you know? And almost every time I get into like an argument with somebody on a forum, they're a fundamental literalist and they're yelling at me for not taking the Bible literally and like, how could you be a pastor, yada, yada, yada. And then I have a series of questions that I ask them. Yeah. And it's things like, so, okay, when did God create vegetation, before or after humans? You know, where was Xerxes during it's all these historical things, because I know, because I've studied the document. And they're impossible questions to answer. You read the bill? Literalist. Right, I read the bill, right? I bothered to do like, and it's one thing, I understand, the Bible is a thick thing, you know, legislation is thick. And I have the benefit in my job to be able to spend hours of my work week to actually study these things and educate myself. And not everybody has the benefit of that. I understand that. Right. What I can't stand is people who can't be bothered to read the actual document, but still have a strong, angry opinion about it. Yeah. It's like, what happened to, I don't know. Like we can only, as human beings, we can only care about like 7 things. Like I know, so our mutual friend, Steven, cares a lot about sustainability and the environment. Right. I studied it, and it's just one of those things that like, I'll do what I can, but it's not a thing that's deep inside of me as one of my 7 things. Sure. One of my 7 things that I really care about is stuff like this, like helping people come into themselves, helping people realize what their priorities are, what their values are, and giving them and it doesn't happen automatic. It's hard. It takes practice, but giving them the skills to be able to navigate the social consequences of being yourself. Oh, Like that's a hard thing to learn, and it takes practice.
It does. And it takes going against what the majority of the population has been programmed to do because I think that's the thing, is that like this acceptance piece, this I won't feel love or I won't receive love if I don't give the answer that everybody's expecting me to give.
Yeah.
Woo!
So I won't receive love. That's why it's so important to find how to love yourself.
Right.
So that you are never separated from love because you love yourself. And I would say, as a pastor, for me, that is centered in the trust in a loving, creative force that actually wants good for you and for others. Right. Like surrendering to something that is bigger than us, that actually is moving things forward in a positive, grace-filled way. Right. For me, my love of self comes externally from my trust in that force, that the universe is moving towards order and goodness and charity more than it's moving in the way of disorder and chaos and violence.
Right.
And that's hard because violence sells, and so that's what we see all the time. Right. There's not that many stories about things that are moving in the right direction, but they are, broadly speaking, have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do. There's too much suffering, because any needless suffering is too much. Oh,
for sure.
So we have a lot of work to do, but we're doing better now than we were doing 100 years ago.
Well, I think the groups of people that are stepping into their truth and their power is growing. Mm-hmm. And so now people who want to jump ship over here, they have a support system and a community, and they're not just, on their little boat rowing by themselves going,
there's like a raft to jump to.
There's a raft to jump to. And you're right. I mean, it all comes back to, we start talking about transitions, and you said that the key to life is grief, and understanding how to manage stress and all these situations, and not necessarily always make it a negative thing. Like that you can be moving towards positive things and upgrade, but understanding that you have every right to feel loss of something, whether it be a loss of a part of yourself so that you can become a better version of yourself, or
when I became a pastor, it was one of the best things that ever happened to me. It came not only with a fulfillment of my calling, but with literal financial, like I got a raise and lots of good things. One of the things that I do when I get really sad is I go and look at, because all of our old worship videos are online. Yeah. And so me and my wife, Francisca, she's a singer, she was part of the band. And we'll go sometimes down the rabbit hole and watch old videos because we miss making music together. Oh man. We really grieve it. Like it's and we try to find opportunities to do it when we can, but it's not the same. No. And like that era it's not going to come back. Yeah. But I have kind of two choices. I can either numb the sad feelings and not enjoy all the benefits that are happening here, because you can only numb everything. You can't numb one thing. Or I can allow myself to feel sad. I can take moments where I literally tear up watching old videos and allow myself to feel that way, which then gives me permission. So we just had a big event yesterday. We were at a Pride event in Orlando, and we had a booth, and I was nervous. I didn't know if anybody would care that we were there, because we're a church and it's about gay pride, and it's like, like what's going to happen? And it went so unbelievably well. Mm-hmm. It went better than I ever could have hoped for. If I don't cry and grieve the loss of playing music with my friends and my wife, then I don't get to experience the joy and the gratitude of yesterday. Right. Well, and isn't that the concept? Numb one thing.
Right. And isn't that the concept of it's better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all?
Yes. Right. And that is true. That is true.
Because you had this amazing thing. Because what comes to my mind, and your wife being one of my best friends, it was a part of this era, is I have so many students and so many coworkers and friends of mine from when my dad owned a dance studio in Kansas City for 15 years and created one of the most iconic and family-oriented spaces where we could all just come on Saturday night and swing dance and love each other. And it's like Cheers, everybody knows your name kind of thing. And I have people from my generation in their 20s and 30s to 80-year-olds that were dancing when they were in their 60s. Like, we've never found a place like that again. And there's a part of me that feels sad that, like, oh, that's over. But then there's a huge part of me that's like, look what we did. Like, we created this incredible space, and I got to be raised in that space, and my brother. And that's why we have such incredible friends like Francisca, like Joan, like all these people that we know that I would not have had if I was just going to school like a normal person. And I have memories, you know what I mean? Like, again, it's sad. It's like, oh man, I wish we could do that again. But then, like, how can we do it better? Or how can we do something similar? Like,
that's the other part too, is for example, the music stuff, I'm finding that, well, if that's something that I consistently miss,
let's do it.
Now the math problem is, okay, well, what would it take to create it?
Right.
And so one of the things I do is because we're a weird church, I don't have a Sunday morning worship commitment. And so sometimes I'll just call up friends of mine in the area who are other pastors, and I'll be like, hey, I need to come play guitar. Yeah. Like, when can you get me? Like, I need to come play guitar.
That's awesome.
And so, like, that's just one of the things that scratches the itch. It's not the same, but if it ever gets to the level where I'm like, nah, I really need that, then now I have all the capacity and all the knowledge of what we did to, if it's worth the energy, to build a new version of it.
Right.
Like, make that happen if it's really important,
Well, that's it. It goes back to, again, what do we value?
Yes. Yeah.
Right. What are your pillars? I mean,
what do you value? What does it cost? I mean, it really comes down to cost benefit, but it's really hard to do that if you don't know the benefit side. If you don't know who you are, if you don't love who you are, then it's really hard to value enough of that to justify the cost of what it would take to do it. And the inverse is true also. If you do love yourself and you know what you value, then it's like, well, then that's a no-brainer. Of course it's worth 40 hours a week to do that. Like, of course absolutely. Like, shun the money. This is what I value, or vice versa. Like, we need the money, so we're gonna suck it up for a year and do it this way.
That's right. Like, that's right. And that's just a matter of weighing those pros and cons.
Yeah.
We could literally talk for hours, for those of you who can see
and
how
have,
we just
and have
done this when we're together, and just we've literally done this on a boat in the south of France.
Yes. Where's my hat? I wore that hat that I got.
Oh my god!
Where were we?
We were in.
We visited Nice. Fréjus. Yeah.
Fréjus.
Yeah. So I wore the hat yesterday.
Amazing.
It was perfect for my bald head in the sun.
So good. As you can see, Chris and I can go onto so many tree branches and branches of branches of not just this topic, but so many different topics. I want to encourage you to figure out who you are and what your value systems are. Like, look at your life and who are you playing pretend with in your life? Yeah. And who are you able to just be yourself without, walking on eggshells? I think those are the first couple questions that I think definitely made a huge difference in my life early on, that allowed me to create my circle of trust and my people, like you said, that I value sincerity and honesty and vulnerability, because those things create these deep rooted connections, and it's not just surface level. I can't do the surface level. I don't think I've ever been able to do it, but I think I was a lot better at pretending when I was in my 20s. And now I'm just like, my bullshit meter is just off the radar.
It's
I can't do it anymore.
So I went off sugar because I did like a keto diet for a couple months, and I used to drink Dr. Pepper all the time. And now I went off sugar, and now I drink Dr. Pepper Zero because it tastes good to me. And if I ever have a normal Dr. Pepper, it's intolerable. Like it's
like, how did I
so sweet and sugary and bad for me. And that, so it was difficult for those months to go off of sugar.
Right.
But now I'm healthier. I enjoy what I have, and I can't believe that I ever tolerated drinking the regular Dr. Pepper that was so sweet.
So often.
That's kind of what it's like.
Yeah.
Like it is rough when you first enter into the, like, I'm going to prioritize sincerity and genuine connection. You're going to lose people. It's going to be painful. It's going to be difficult.
Transition.
And after that season, you're going to like, I can't believe I ever tolerated a relationship where people would not accept me as I am.
Right.
Like,
well, it becomes the new you. It becomes the new you. And that's the thing, is that, I specialize a lot in my coaching with habits, and it's like, well, how do you build these new habits? And that is just a new version of yourself. It's like, you don't even think about it after a while. When you do it so often, it's like, this is just my lifestyle. This is who I am. So I walk through the world with these characteristics, these value systems, these traits. And if you don't feel like they're serving you anymore, the transition between dropping this value system and picking up a new one is not going to be easy, but it's going to be damn worth it.
Yeah. Go ahead and get a grieving. Make the changes.
Right.
Because the changes are worth it.
Oh my gosh. And you'll become a new version of yourself that will feel so much lighter and just not feel like, again, like you have to pretend all the time. Like, I don't walk through the world pretending to people that I like laughing at their jokes, or I agree with some people, they don't even want to say, share an opinion, because it's like, well, we definitely have different political stances, or we definitely have different ways of thinking, and I don't want to get into an argument. It's like, why do we have to get into an argument? Why can't it just be like, Christine believes this, and so-and-so believes that, and we still love hanging out at the bowling alley. Why can't it be that?
I have a phrase I use. I've weaponized it. Well, fair enough. And that usually means like, okay, I think we've reached the end of this train of thought.
We're done here.
Yeah. Like we've started repeating our points to each other. Like, all right, fair enough.
Yeah. We agree to disagree. Live your life.
Let's why don't we go see what's on the radio or whatever?
That's it. Yeah. Let's go grab a drink. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Let's change the subject.
I love it. Well, great transition. That being said, I want you to tell people, just like, if they want to know more about you or what you do, or kind of like have more of these conversations, you have a couple of outlets that you...
So YouTube is probably the quickest, easiest way to get kind of what I am and what we're about.
Yeah.
The Mad Pastor is the thing I'm kind of throwing my weight behind these days. It's a slightly less reverent take on theology. My tagline is it's theology for people who hate the church. So that's probably the quickest way. And then also, I'm the pastor of Kindred UMC. We also have a YouTube channel. Instead of sermons, we do panel discussions. So I kind of do all the sermon prep, but then I have two regular people that are part of my congregation, and we talk about it. And I ask them kind of what their take is on it, and we try to arrive at a consensus. On like what do we think the thrust of this thing actually is. Totally. So the Kindred UMC and the Mad Pastor are probably the easiest, and it's youtube.com at Kindred UMC and at the Mad Pastor.
So we'll put all of those links so they're easy to click in the show notes. So if you guys want to just go click, follow, subscribe to everything that Chris is doing. He is one of, of a group of people in the world trying to do something like this, but I have only met Chris doing this. But I know there's more people doing this, and
Yeah, but I'm the best one.
You are the best one. I personally, I am not a very religious person, and everything that you just said about like trying, understanding the church and all of these things, but doing it in a way, like just the fact that someone has a sermon and lectures what God should be and what
it's like the worst way to teach anybody
anything. It's terrible. And I can't stand it. And that's one of the reasons I don't go to church. But then when
it's also boring.
It's terribly boring. And so to even say that you have a panel discussion, that you are able to bring other people's opinions and experiences and emotions into what it is that you're trying to accomplish so that everybody can benefit it's not even the future. It's where we are right now, and it's where we should be. And I just thank you so much for what you do, because I know you're changing so many lives. And you and I are
complimented by that. Thank you.
No, seriously. And we are able to have these conversations and
my love language is words of affirmation. So
I love it. I'm here for it. I'm here for you. But it's so incredible. And I love being able to have these conversations with you and not feel the pressure of the Bible or the sermon or the word of God, and still feel like I can feel connected to God, but I have a voice as well.
Yeah.
If that kind of,
well, it's the idea is supposed to be people who follow and act and think and treat others the way that Jesus did.
Right.
Like that's kind of the problem the church is facing right now is
totally.
our disciples treat people like crap.
Totally. So thank you all so much for being here. Follow Chris on all his channels, and we will see you next week.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to the Recovering Perfectionist Podcast. I'm Christine, and if this episode resonated with you or spoke to you in any way, please feel free to share. I absolutely love hearing from you guys and your thoughts about the topics based on your experiences. And also, if there's anything you want me to talk about, just screenshot this episode and share it on social media with your comments. Your feedback really helps me to curate episodes that best serve you. If you have time, I would greatly appreciate if you could leave a review wherever you're listening to this episode, whether on Apple or Spotify or any other platform. I'm wishing you a blessed week ahead, and remember, perfection doesn't exist. Take messy action. Healthy habits keep us balanced, and you are enough.